Hello and welcome to the national debate. I'm Madhavdas GK. Viewers, US President Donald Trump appears to have reworked global alliances and friends with his tariffs. For the first time since the Galwan clashes, Prime Minister Modi is expected to visit China for the SCO summit. Just earlier this week, you had the Chinese foreign minister meet Prime Minister Modi, signaling a warming of ties between India and China. China even backed India against the United States and went on to call Trump the bully. Then you have India warming up to Russia like never before, with the Russians even choosing to offer a 5% discount on their oil and has welcomed Indian exports should the Americans block Indian exports with their tariffs. So has Trump reset the world order simply with his unreasonable tariffs? Let's quickly take a look at what really we are discussing at this point of time. The first talking point that we are looking at on the national debate today is what has been stated, in fact, by not just Trump, but several of those in his administration. He says, I don't care what India does with Russia. And he also refers to the two economies as dead economies, certainly something that has sparked off a huge amount of outrage here in India. Then you have Peter Navarro coming out to say that India acts as a global clearinghouse of Russian oil. Then you have Caroline Levitt, who's a press secretary of the White House, who comes out to say that sanctions on India to pressure Russia. The sanctions word being used there instead of tariffs. And then you have Scott Bessent, who's the U.S. Treasury Secretary, who says they are profiteering, they are reselling. These are some of the comments coming in. And of course, going on to call what this is saying, that this is Indian arbitrage, is what Scott Bessent says. Now, these are some of the controversial statements coming out of the United States. But what really are we looking at? And why does India feel that it's being singled out? Just look at the oil imports of China, EU and India when it comes to Russia. 1,90,000 is where China is at, EU is at 1,04,000, India at 1,30,000. Gas imports, India has nil. However, EU has around 1,04,000 here, and 35,000 is where China is at in terms of the million euros. And this really goes to show that India is nowhere the largest when it comes to imports of either oil or gas, yet India is the one that has been singled out time and again. Let's quickly take this across to our guests now who are joining us. Joining us from India are our guests. Ambassador Yash Sinha is a former diplomat. Lieutenant General Raj Shukla, defense expert, is with us. He's a former army commander who's with us. Also with us is Abhijit Iyer Mitra, senior fellow of the IPCS. With us from the United States are Dr. Dave Brat, former member of the U.S. Congress. Matt Link is a Republican strategist. Pratik Chaugale is executive director of the Coalition for Political Forecasting and former policy coordinator on the campaigns of Donald Trump. We have Brian McDonald, journalist based in Russia, and Victor Gao, chair professor of the Suzhou University from China, who's of course joining us. Thank you so much, gentlemen. And let me begin with Dr. Dave Brat. Dr. Dave Brat, some of these statements, some of these positions that have been taken are not isolated. You know, if it was just one odd statement coming in from President Trump or one of the senior officials in his administration, but the downright sarcasm coming out or the criticism coming out of India repeatedly from top officials leads one to suspect that there is a very clear pattern, and this is more than just a bargaining tactic. Your view on this, Dr. Brat?
I think it's a bargaining tactic, but at the highest level, right? The tariffs are not just about Harburger inefficiency triangles, right? They're about geopolitics. Right now, we're in the middle of wars all over the place. We got a fentanyl war right now with Argentina and Mexico maybe coming up. We got Russia, Ukraine, and we need help, right? So who has been paying the bills? I think this is the major point. For the establishment of the post-World War II Bretton Woods liberal order. The liberal order is supposed to protect individual rights, minority factions coming out of the Judeo-Christian West of the United States and James Madison and et cetera. And so the reason I think we're putting hard moves on India is we need you. You are now a huge country with 6% economic growth, which is significant. But we need you to assume your rightful place on the world stage. And you're going to have to make up your mind how that relationship fits with China, who does not believe in the human rights that India believes in. And we also need your help in ending this war. The Europeans, for some reason, are all set on war. So the oil piece continues the subsidization of Russia. And Russia needs to end it. There's nothing good's going to come out of this for Russia. They just want their buffer zone. And the U.S. has been wrong on this in the past, right? Our CIA, our FBI are all under immense scrutiny right now. So I'm not saying we're the angels, right? We have an economy run by monopolies right now, which I don't like. That doesn't fit in with Adam Smith or any of that kind of stuff. So we're getting our house in order, but we need India to help us on the world stage. But
Dr. Brat, let me get this right. Let me get this right. You're essentially saying this is tough love. We're going to call you a dead economy, even though you might be one of the fastest growing major economies. We're going to, come out and call out sanctions. What so far was termed only tariffs. All of this is aimed at improving India-US ties. It's a very strange way of improving the ties between the two countries, anyone would say.
Not if you look at the empirical evidence. He turned around on all the European stage a few years ago, pointed at them and said roughly, you're a bunch of losers, right? He doesn't really mean that. He's a New York business guy negotiator. Now what's Europe doing? They were deadbeats. They were deadbeats in terms of their defense policies. That's why they cannot stand up to Russia right now. They need us, the United States, in the middle. They were paying less than 2% of their GDP percentage terms. And now they're going up to 2, 3, 4, 5. And we'll see, but they're still in no ways ready, right? Their troops, I think Russia, whatever, has about 1.5 million troops ready to roll. UK and the French, who seem to want to go to war more than anybody for some reason, go figure that one out. They have about 380,000 troops. So it's crazy. Everyone wants the U.S. to do all the heavy lifting to provide the seaways with China. What about Taiwan's rights of the individuals? Do we believe in freedom together or not?
Absolutely,
that's what it's going to come down to.
That's exactly why, in fact, India was moving in a certain direction for the past 2.5 decades. But suddenly all of that has come crashing down. Ambassador Yash Sinha, I want you to come in on this. Are these examples that Donald Trump is a tough negotiator? He's just used to all of this tough talking, brash talking, and ultimately it's all to drive a hard bargain. But the point being made over here is that there are some very real diplomatic outcomes and fallouts of what's happening between India and the US. And it would be perhaps to US's detriment also if India were to get closer and closer to China and Russia, as appears to be happening after a gap of a fairly long time. Ambassador Sinha.
Madhav, thank you for having me on your show. I always state this at the beginning of the debates that I come on this subject. India and the US is one of the most important partnerships for India and for the United States. However, what has transpired in the last few months is extremely unfortunate. And it's if that tough love, if that is the way to woo India, to become a partner, to side with them, I'm afraid it's going to have the opposite effect. In fact, India is not Europe. Europe has security guarantees, part of NATO. Japan has that. India is different. And I'm afraid there is a problem in Washington because they don't have an India hand there, really sort of on top of things, or at least advising the people that matter. You don't have a US ambassador in Delhi. You don't have anybody senior enough to advise on how to handle India. And there's a wealth of experience. It's not that, there is no experience in Washington. For the last 3 decades, under successive Republican and Democrat administrations, they've handled India and they've assiduously built up this relationship. And I think all of us want this relationship to succeed. But I'm afraid it's not going to happen like this. I mean, we are not subsidizing the war between Russia and China. Ukraine. It's China that's doing it. Europe, your statistics showed, even the US. And I just read today about some US oil company trying to set up, logistics company trying to set up shop in Russia. So, the fact of the matter is that if it's a pressure tactic, it won't work. And if it's not a pressure tactic, then I'm worried because I think this relationship is far too important.
Absolutely. Let me bring in Matt on that. Matt Klink, respond to that. If it's a pressure tactic, it's certainly not going to work. And the very fact that you don't have an ambassador here in New Delhi after a fairly long period of time, you have such a huge, long gap when you don't have a representative here, to try and understand the politics of this country, because India has a certain history. We are moving closer to the United States. We were moving in a certain direction from our military procurements to trade, so on and so forth, lowering the tariff barriers, which are currently a big issue. But if you're going to force something, you could end up breaking it. And that's a sense that the Trump administration seems to be blissfully unaware of.
Well, look, I think that the relationship with India or between India and America is a lot more durable than the one you're describing. You make it sound like it's this fragile egg that can't have any disagreements. And just the mere fact that what India has done in the past and that the deal that was cut with the Biden administration and taking what Scott
Matt, can I just come in for just 30 seconds? What you're calling disagreements are being perceived as insults on ground here in India. And that's where there's a huge problem of perception, a massive one at that.
Okay. Well, I can tell you that it's not a massive. Look, I am not an ambassador or focused on diplomatic relations between countries. I can tell you that from American domestic consumption, this is not an issue that's rising to the top. I will tell you that Scott Bessent highlighting that India purchased $60 billion worth of petroleum products in 24 and 25, and that they sold it for $16 billion in excess profits. And the fact that you're buying oil at a discount from Russia. I mean, look, that's
and what about China?
Right.
Where are the sanctions on China?
Again, this is not a world where everybody is treated equally. Not all are the same.
All right. Will you treat your own regime? Will you treat your own regime equally? The same U.S. government that actually asked us to buy that oil? Why is memory so short?
Well, no. Different regime and a failed regime at that in America. Look, if our
that's your perception, sir. That's your perception. But governments deal with governments. They don't deal with political parties.
If our relationship with India is so tenuous that on every single thing you're going to run to a dictator in Russia and communist China, you're a hell of a lot better off with America than you are with the Russians and the Chinese.
All right.
And if you guys can't see that, then you're pretty naive.
Let me get General Shukla in on that. General Shukla, this is a very simplistic understanding. It's not that India is suddenly running in towards Beijing or towards Moscow. Yes, there are certain visits that have happened, but India feels that it's been literally pushed to do that on a number of counts. General Shukla.
So, if this is American tough love, I mean, no intelligent man does romance this way. I mean, the outcomes are going to be obvious. So America must not only take a look at its tough love, but also the empirical evidence. So let's just examine what Peter Navarro said, that the road to peace in Ukraine runs through New Delhi. So what is the West and the Americans and the Europeans doing? We've all heard about the shadow fleets, this network of vessels to evade policing that has tripled in size since the conflict broke out. Tripled in size. And where is all that stuff going to? Europe. Today morning, I think in the Financial Times, there's an article, a company called Weather4, a US oil field group which does business in the oil sector in Russia. Its profits from 2022 to 2024 have gone up by 61%. In February this year, they put out in advertisements for 200 additional jobs. When Scott Bessent talks about a 10% markup for weapon supplies to Ukraine through Europe, that is blatant profiteering. So American foreign policy, its exceptionalism, if it was not about treating people equally, it was about being fair. Are these your metrics of fairness? And now let me tell you, where does the road to peace actually run? The road to peace runs through the combat realities in Kharkiv and Kherson, where, American vagaries, its shift in its policy positions has deprived the Ukrainian military of crucial weapon supplies at very critical moments, and that has caused them to lose operational advantage. Ultimately, peace will be dictated by the metrics in the combat lines and not New Delhi. Even if it is New Delhi, your empirical evidence is wrong. So the road to peace will run in corrections in Europe, greater wisdom from America, and the front lines in Kherson and Kharkiv.
Dr. Brat, I want you to come in on this.
Where,
Yeah, Dr. Brat, I want you to come in on this. I mean, there's a war happening. I mean, at a time when, Russia's invested over 3 years in this battle. I mean, sure, both sides may be battle-weary, maybe wanting to pull out. Do you seriously believe, and why does Washington believe that Prime Minister Modi picking up the phone and calling President Putin and say, hey there, Vladimir, call off the war because I'm getting taxed 50% on tariffs? I mean, is that seriously what people in Washington think is going to happen?
I don't think it would hurt. That would be a nice thing. And, everybody hears it's like an Oprah Winfrey show. There's too much on feelings going on here, right? If you're the U.S., you might ask India, you're hurting my feelings, right? This joining up with BRICS on the reserve currency thing. I mean, it might be a win for you strategically in the short run, but it's not. The question is, how do we all play together in the sandbox with China and Russia? Russia has already won the war, right? It's over. And how we're allowing Zelensky to run this thing on, we got some forces in our own country that want endless wars. But there's the oil issue, there's the BRICS issue, there's the China issue, there's the trade deficit issue. There's a chart from Bank of America and the World Bank that has the G20 all with 200 to 300% higher tariffs on us than we have on them. So we're running huge trade deficits with the whole world. And, we could whine and cry and whatever, too. We just want fair rules across the board. So the folks here are saying this is asymmetric. OK, it is. But we're on the road. The irony of the tariff policy is a lot of the world is lowering their tariffs, and we're getting to a more free trade, probably general equilibrium in the long run here. So that's a good thing.
Ambassador Sinha, would you like to respond to that? Because this seems to be a very simplistic way of looking at things as if all of diplomacy is a zero-sum game. It doesn't really work like that.
Absolutely, Madhav. In fact, India's membership of the BRICS is of great use to the United States because we are the guardrails. You must understand that. We are the ones who are standing in the way of de-dollarization, etc. And now you're pushing us in the opposite direction. And by the way, India has been a member of BRICS and SCO for a long time. And by attending summits, etc., India is just hedging. It is doing the multi-alignment which we stand for. So that is not understood. If we are going back to the days of John Foster Dulles, where it's black or white and no shades of gray, then I'm afraid we have a problem. And we have not reinvented the wheel here. We've been doing it right through. But we, as I said, whatever happens with with Russia or with China, as far as India is concerned, the most important relationship is with the United States in any which way. Whether Absolutely. It's the economy, whether it's defense is debatable, but certainly economy as far as cultural, civil, the contacts, people-to-people contacts, it's immense. For Indians, the U.S. is our natural ally, natural partner. And I don't understand. I think that is not being reciprocated.
Absolutely. And also the very fact that tariffs, Dr. Brat, you'd also agree, India was one of the first off the bat when Prime Minister Modi visited Washington earlier this year. There were some concessions that were announced at that point of time. So India was very serious. Somewhere US decided to play hardball and things have gone completely off pitch. That's the sense over here in New Delhi.
No, I mean, I understand what everybody's saying. And by the way, congratulations on this show and this panel. This is very good. This is very, civil discussion. There's disagreements. There's hard issues we got to solve together. I've liked all the commentary I hear right here, moving in the right direction. And so, from the U.S. perspective, a lot of countries, I'm not a consultant, but people say, how do we get, foreign investment into our country? And I say, the answer is you better first bring foreign investment into our country, in the U.S., right? Then Trump will like you and things will go great. And so I think that right now we're just saying in the short run, right, we're trying to solve a lot of issues right now. We should be focused solely on China, but we're wasting our U.S. resources on these crazy things going on with Ukraine and Russia and all this. And we need India to lay down the law, right? We're against communism. The communist countries say they have rights for individuals, but those rights embedded in their constitutions all come underneath the party. So, some citizens are more important than others, right? It's like George Orwell, whatever. Right. India's not like that. You've got a real commitment to your citizens. We do. And we need the rest of the world to learn to play that game. Can you imagine a world, if China would learn to respect its people and play a free market game, we could be so rich together, it would be stunning. So we're asking for your help in the short run. That's as positively as I can put it.
All right, talking about the commitment to the people is a very important point, and that's why, Abhijit Iyer Mitra, I want to ask you this question. What really has caused all of this consternation? Is it really buying oil from Russia, the fact that India is perhaps not ready to open up its agriculture and other sectors when it comes to tariffs, or is it the whole issue of credit being given to the United States as far as ending of the India and Pakistan war is concerned? Because India has made its position very clear that there was no question of any mediation. That's the stated position of the government of India, and that's been so for several decades. There's nothing new there. Yet, there appears to be some amount of concentration on that account when it comes to Washington, D.C. Abhijit.
Thank you, Madhav. Look, it's nothing's ever monocausal, right? You're looking at a multi-causality out here. Personal pique is almost certainly a factor in this. Corruption is also a certain factor in this. You had those Pakistani crypto bros, and seriously, have you ever heard of Pakistan being a powerhouse of anything modern tech other than nukes and missiles? And even there, it's not even a powerhouse. They get, Chinese hand-me-downs and Chinese rejects, really. So what you end up having is you have a crypto bro access to the White House. And some of it is just fantastical decision making. Where is the oil in Pakistan? Have you heard of oil in Pakistan? But Trump actually seems to believe there's oil in Pakistan. So there is an element of corruption. There is an element of people around him not telling him what's really going on. There's an element that he doesn't know how the subcontinent and subcontinental politics function. There is an element of personal pique to it. If he had studied history, he would have known very well. India doesn't respond to threats very well. The last time in 71, the US sent the fleet against us, a whole aircraft carrier. They could have probably sunk us in 45 minutes. Did we back off? No, we didn't. He's gotten this very, very wrong. Let me contrast this with the diplomatic finesse of, say, Obama. When the JCPOA sanctions were imposed, the sanctions for the JCPOA were imposed on Iran. We were asked what we wanted. We said, well, we need to buy Iranian oil. There's no way around it. So the Americans agreed to secondary sanctions, which is that we would buy oil at a much, much lower rate. What that rate would do was it would give Iran some amount of currency circulation, but they would essentially be selling oil to us at less than cost. Now, Obama was quite happy with it. Trump's presidency is different. He's not happy with it. But look, if he's willing to burn bridges, this is an American cost-benefit analysis to have, not an Indian cost-benefit, because in our cost-benefit, our people and the needs of our people are going to come first. We're not going to be like Europeans prioritizing Europe over India.
Okay, before I come across to Prateek, Brian and Victor, and I thank you for your patience, gentlemen, I just want to very clearly put this in context as far as the Indian perspective is concerned. When it comes to this whole issue of oil buying and when it comes to China, what are the statements coming in? This is what Marco Rubio has stated. He's a US Secretary of State. He says oil that's going to China only gets refined is the first defense. Oil sent to China is sold back to Europe. The third defense that is coming out is that oil is sold in the global marketplace. And the fourth defense is that anyone buying that oil would pay more. This is the kind of defense coming in that sanctioning China would disrupt global oil prices. And let me take this question across to Prateek. Prateek, if sanctioning China is going to disrupt global oil prices, then what about sanctioning India? And really what you're trying to achieve is that India stops buying all that oil from Russia. What impact will that have? Please tell me.
Well, the truth of the matter is we don't know. And I think that one point I'll make here is, look, I think a lot of the commentary and a lot of the outrage in India, I think there's a certain premise that the U.S. and the Trump administration has a clear strategy. They really have a theory of what will happen, what don't happen. The fact of the matter is that a lot of the tensions with India have to do with this U.S.-Russia conflict. If you look at the way the Trump administration has handled its Russia policy, you look for that matter at how the last 3 American presidents have dealt with Russia, it's pretty clear that the U.S. does not know how to deal with this Russia problem. And so you made the point earlier that do American policymakers think that putting pressure on India will somehow pressure Moscow? I think the answer is yes, they do. Now, will that yield the results that they want? Maybe, maybe not. But I think that an important context here is that there's a lot of confusion in this White House. There's a lot of confusion in Washington on what to do with the Russia problem. Clearly, the Trump administration's Ukraine policy has not yielded the outcome they want. Do I think that America is approaching India with the right tact, with the right approach? Probably not, but I think that a lot of this is a symptom of the fact that this Russia problem is a very hard one to crack, and this administration, among many others in Washington, don't actually know what the right pressure points are here.
Right. Let me bring in Brian McDonald on that note. Brian McDonald, is there a essential, a basic lack of understanding, as Pratik seems to be suggesting, of knowing what really buttons should be pressed and what should not? Because it appears to be, an attempt to shake up the entire box, the entire sandbox, as Dave Brat was describing earlier, not thinking about the consequences, because diplomacy works in certain ways. All of that seems to have been forgotten, and a free pass has been given to President Trump to just do what he feels like.
I think there's a general misunderstanding of Russia across the West due to a lack of expertise. One of the reasons is that most of the people who comment on Russia in Western countries and advise governments about Russia are extremely liberal and have liberal arts degrees, have gone to liberal arts colleges, and that makes them misunderstand Russia. So what we've had is a situation where before there was a view that Russia was ideologically communist and ideologically bound. That disappeared, and ideologically dictatorial, totalitarian. And then there was this new narrative that the liberals pushed in the 90s, which was that Russia was a transition state on its way to becoming a liberal democracy, the Michael McFauls of this world and Anne Applebaums and so on. And now they've gone back to the first idea that Russia is, it can't be fixed. It has to be totalitarian. It can't work any other way. The reality is that Russia does not really have any ideology except that they want things to be good for Russia. Whether the system has to be liberal, democratic, or communist, or whatever, that's not the fundamental point when it comes to international relations. And the big thing they've learned from the Soviet collapse is that, and America makes this mistake now, telling foreign countries you're either with us or against us is a road to ruin. That's what the communists did, the Soviets did, and it was a disaster. So what Russia's really trying to do now is basically be friends with everybody if possible. So what I mean by that is there's some idea that, they're in some alliance with China that I've seen called a dragon bear alliance. It's absolute codswallop. I mean, they're with China because they have to be. Because they've been pushed into that corner. They'd much rather be friends with America, be friends with India, be friends with China, be friends with Great Britain, be friends with Germany, all together. They'd love that. But unfortunately, the ideological thing, which is actually coming from the West, not from Russia, is preventing that. Now, I hear some comments here again. There's a little bit of a Marvel Comics view of the world, of goodies and baddies, and it's way too simplistic. But about the question that you actually asked, to address it directly rather than going off in tangents, look, Russia is probably the most Indophile major country in the world. I mean, they genuinely like India, and they genuinely like Indian culture. Whether they're so, pro-China, I'm not really sure. Like I said, it's a kind of marriage of convenience. But the reality is that when you look at the current tariffs and sanctions being placed on gas, the European Union, and this is a fact, is giving more money to Russia than it's giving to Ukraine. This is a fact. This is just a fact. Despite all the waffle, despite all the nonsense coming out of von der Leyen and Kallas, this is an actual fact. They are subsidizing Russia to a far greater degree than they're subsidizing Ukraine. Now, they have no choice because they've got nowhere else to get.
And let me bring in Dr. Dave Brat on that. Dr. Dave Brat, I'd like you to respond to that. Either someone in Washington, D.C. has been spending too much time with, superhero comics, defining the world as goodies and baddies, or why else would you ignore the huge volume of trade that's happening? And incidentally, the same United States that's berating India for, subsidizing Russia actually engages in trade with Russia. What about that?
No, I enjoyed the comments. I'm kind of one of those liberal arts guys. But again, just go to the TV cameras last week. Trump was having a veritable love fest with Putin coming down the red carpet, and our mainstream media was going apoplectic. They were going bananas. That how can you love this terrorist? So if you guys haven't noticed, we have a bit of a internal revolution going on here called America First. And our CIA and our State Department and our FBI have been corrupt for 50 years. Our CIA has been running coup d'etats around the world. We need to end all of that stuff. Trump's trying to end it. So when you say we're not coherent, duh. I mean, I hope you follow. We're having a very serious revolution trying to get back to helping the American worker. Your commentary here on the elites and the big tech bros and the monopolies running the world. Yes, that's what's going on. I'm against all of it. That all is aligned with central governments, too much power up at the top. You're a democracy. We need to bring it back down to not only democracy, but constitutional republics.
Okay.
And so I enjoyed the comments, but you guys got to pay attention to our domestic politics, and then you'll understand we're not so confused. We're just at war with each other. And Trump is actually fighting on behalf of the people.
No,
and once you see that, you'll get it.
That's perfectly understandable, sir, because we have similar politics here and extremely polarized politics at that here in India. But when it comes to the country talking as one and talking to another country, there has to be some amount of consistency. And we call it another friendly country, a dead economy. We talk about putting out sanctions instead of tariffs. Sanctions, a word that was used about 27 years ago, hasn't been heard of since in the US-India context at least. But let me quickly bring in Victor Gao. Abhijit, I'm seeing your hand go up. I want Victor to respond to what you're saying. Dr. Dave Brat. Victor, the larger question is this. The point of view coming in repeatedly from the US is that you guys can't trust China and Russia. US and India are far better aligned and our interests are far better aligned. Your response to that comment coming in from the United States?
The problem with revolutions like the MAGA revolution is they end up eating their own kids. You've seen this with the French Revolution. You saw this with the Russian Revolution and things like that. See, there were two people who opposed Hitler. One was the British. They didn't go around executing their own generals and their own intelligence chiefs and things like that. And they ended up with very few casualties in World War II. Stalin, on the other hand, executed his entire general staff, all his admirals, all his, I don't know if they had air marshals, but whatever close to air marshals they had. And they ended up paying with 26 million lives for it. Now, if MAGA wants to go down, they're going to win, sure. If they want to go down the Stalin path, executing everyone the absolutely clumsy way in which Elon Musk did his joke, the way in which they were meant to, balance the budget. Have you seen a balanced budget right now, Madhav? Have you seen a balanced budget? Is this big, beautiful budget balanced? Now the story is it's no longer going to be a balanced budget. It's an impetus budget to grow. You were given all the codswallop about Epstein. Did you see the Epstein files released? After the Attorney General said, I'm sitting on it. I'm going to release it tomorrow. We have to be extremely careful about those files we give out. They then released the video footage of Epstein hanging himself minus 2 minutes. Now, a lot of this also has to do to deflect from Epstein. Remember, this whole thing started off when that Epstein thing was in full swing. So, congratulations on the MAGA revolution, revolt, whatever you want to call it, uprising, glorious freedom struggle. To me, it just reeks of a let 1,000 flowers bloom and the Cultural Revolution. But best of luck to them. They're going to win. The question is, what is the price they want to pay for their victory? So I wish them well. I wish MAGA well. I wish Trump well. I actually wish the MAGA revolution on America, and I bid them success.
US and India are aligned together, and how much, when you compare the ties of India to China and India to Russia, can it really be compared? That is point number one. And point number two, you have statements, for instance, coming in from Chinese Ambassador Xu Feihong, who frames terrorism as the enemy of the world, but similarly closes its eyes when it comes to state-sponsored terror from Pakistan. So there are many in India also who are actually wondering whether that commitment to those ties is really something that's workable in the long term or even in the medium term.
I think you are asking me a question. Thank you very much. I think for a great country like India, with the largest population in the world, with thousands of years of history, the worst thing which can happen to India is someone else comes to you and say, you need to accept these values. You need to treat country A as your enemy. You need to treat country B as your enemy. And then they will tell you that's the worst which can happen to India, is that you cannot buy oil from Russia, while they themselves are buying oil, buy uranium, buy many other things from Russia. And then they say to India that if you buy oil and sell oil for a profit, you are changing international order. No, that means Indians are smart. If they can make a profit out of the trade, what do they expect? Do they expect Indians are dumb so that they buy oil and sell oil for a loss? Come on. I think it's very presumptuous for these people, for these countries, to come to the door of a great nation like India and try to make mockery of such great nation. And it is very presumptuous for President Trump to call the Indian economy as a dead economy. No, the Indian economy is not dead. The Indian economy has great potential. So if the people in India believe in these proclamations that the Indian economy is dead, then you lose all hope. You need to make up your own mind and really strive for your own potentials. Now, the American panelists talked about China and China-US trade war imposed by the United States. China is ready to talk with the United States if they are serious. But if the United States really wants to pick a fight with China, China will fight till the very end, until the United States will not have a single iota of rare earth. That will bring their national defense industry to a complete halt. So I hope decision makers in Washington will realize what is the consequence of imposing maximum pressure on China. China will not give in to the pressure from Washington. China will treat the United States as an equal. But if the United States wants to bully China, China will fight back with all its resources until, for example, two-way trade between China and the United States grinds to a complete halt. Do any American people believe that will be the best solution for the United States? The farmers in the United States are already crying foul because they cannot sell their soybean to the Chinese market. China is now buying soybeans and many other agricultural products from Argentina, from Brazil. So the American farmers will lose this season of their products. They cannot sell these products to the largest market in China. Who is at fault? The responsibility lies in whoever who launched this anti-China trade war. This is the consequence that they are suffering, and China is defending free trade. Tell any American that defending free trade is in their own interest, rather than against the Americans' interest.
Let me quickly bring in Matt Link on that. Matt Link, you want to respond to that? That all of this misery of the American farmers who are unable to sell their crop this year or this season is essentially because of the policies of the government of the United States and not because of China. Your response to what Victor Gao said?
Completely laughable. The fact that the United States has had its lunch eaten for the last 20 years by globalist poor trade rules that disadvantaged America, and that we now have a president who says we're not going to stand for this anymore. Again, I hear this panel and everybody is saying the same thing. You're looking out for your country. We're finally have a U.S. president that's going to look out for our country. If it doesn't suit our economic self-interest and bolster America first, then we're not going to cave in. And your statistic about the EU itself doesn't buy oil. Individual countries in Europe buy oil. So we should crack down on them, just as we should crack down on you.
They're one entity. They're one entity. There's no crackdown on either the EU or on China, which is what India finds so strange, Matt Link.
Individual countries have refineries. So, look, you could say what you want. We are going to look after America's best interest first. If you want to do business with us, clearly your prime minister saw that because he was one of the first people to come over and meet with Donald Trump.
Absolutely.
So
no question about wanting to do business.
The U.S. is the place where you want to do business.
Absolutely. No question of wanting to do business, but you have to treat partners with a similar amount of respect. And General Shukla wants to come in on this. I'm going to let General Shukla respond to you. General Shukla.
Of course we want to do business, but we want to do reasonable business. You can't bully a country like India. Please understand that. And if you choose not to do that, the Indo-US relationship, the possibilities are endless. Let me point out in the Indo-American, military sphere. Look at the stuff that we have bought from you over the last 10 to 15 years. C-17s, C-130s, Apaches, Havitzers, the P-8I maritime aircraft. I mean, the Indo-US relationship was growing. I have many friends in the American military, wonderful people. So the relationship was growing. It is such a tragedy that a small part of the MAGA camp is so obsessed with this deal business that you're destroying the wider relationship. May I urge you to get wisdom back into the relationship. America first does not mean that you self-destruct. Please. The globe is not merely America. It has multiple interests. And if you choose to change the tone and tenor of your, engagement to reasonableness, of course we can come together. We can come together and we can change the geopolitical dynamics in Asia. But please understand one thing. India's fundamental instincts are autonomous. If you want expediency, the India policy with pragmatism. Absolutely. You want sheer two-penny expediency, go to Pakistan. And if you don't wish to go to Pakistan, this exchange between Victor Gao and the American gentleman before him will tell us that India has options beyond America.
You want to respond to that, Dr. Dave Brat?
Yeah, well, first of all, I asked some of my free trade libertarian friends, can you do free trade with a Chinese totalitarian communist system? And it's laughable on its face. Free trade goes back to Adam Smith and free markets and the price system, right? And so China doesn't have free anything. They don't have free people. They don't have free markets. And their talking points, that was just a host of talking points, negative. They do not know how to find a win-win global solution if it hit them in the head, right? The idea that a totalitarian regime is talking about freedom in any sense, much less free markets. Why are they building up a blue navy the size of they're building up weapon systems on all these islands and whatever? Let's get rid of all that stuff, right? Let's just do trade, have no tariffs on anybody, and move forward, right? So I don't buy that line at all. I don't see any evidence that China's trying to win friends around the world. India, the same talking points. We don't whine in the U.S. One of your guys was just talking about World War II, and we're killing people over here like Lenin and Stalin and what. I'm not aware of any deaths over here. If you could point to one, it might be helpful before you go off on the diatribe. And just as a footnote, the U.S. won World War II, right? People might be marching around in different uniforms if it wasn't for the good guys in the United States of America fighting with the Allies, chiefly among them Russia. I saw a jaw drop. But just wanted to point out the U.S. Played a major role there for freedom for the world, right? We have a couple oceans between us, and we stepped out and we provided the buildup after the war with Reconstruction, with the Marshall Plan. The memories seem a little faulty on the goodwill put forward by the good old United States for the last 70 years. And now it's time for everybody to step up with rules and principles that they will sign on the dotted line, including China. What rules will you live by in a global order? And I'm dying to see that signature.
Okay, many hands going up. Victor Gao, I'd like you to respond first, and then I'll go across to other panelists. Victor Gao.
If this is a question for me, let me tell the American panelists, don't mess around with free trade and don't destroy free trade. To protect free trade is to protect the fundamental interest of the American people. And you need to tell the American people who will pay for all these tariffs charged by the United States. It is the American people who will pay all these tariffs. So don't deny the American people of their right to know the truth. Don't tell them lies. Tell them the truth, that the American people will pay for all these tariffs. Don't fool the American people as you want to fool the people in India. No, the Indian people are very smart. They will not give in to your attempt as if they are kindergarten kids. Without knowledge, they have 5,000 years or 8,000 years of civilization, much longer than your civilization. And to lecture to nations like Indians is complete absurd. It doesn't create any constructive purpose. You should not go to India and tell them which country is their enemy. That decision should be made by the people in India themselves. They do not need an outsider to tell them who is their friend and who is their enemy. Do you really think the Indian people do not have enough brain power
Okay.
to know who is their enemy and
Okay.
who is their friends.
Okay.
Do
Okay.
you really think that the president of the United States calling the Indian economy dead economy should generate goodwill among the Indian people?
Well, that's exactly the question. I want Ambassador Sinha to come in on this now. Ambassador Sinha, very quickly.
Madhav, I have 2 points. One, we respect the United States. We are aware, acutely aware of the contribution of the United States towards global security in World War I and World War II. So there is no, I mean, as far as India is concerned, I'm not talking about China here. 2, who gave China the free pass? Which country is responsible? So we don't want to go into history. What I'm trying to say is, look at the India-US economic relationship. The India-US services trade is balanced, and it's huge. And the contribution made by both sides to each other's economies is fantastic in the tech sector, in IT, and other sectors. Look at the number of Indian students studying there that contribute to the US economy. That's all that has to be taken into account when you talk about an economic relationship between two countries. It's not just a deficit in goods. We have a deficit of $100 billion with China, and we are worried about it, certainly. And we try to see how we can bridge that gap. So I think you have to take a holistic view. You cannot take things out of context and push them, because if you do that, then you're like a wrecking ball that's coming and hitting the relationship. It's not fragile egos or fragile relationship. No, it's the way you handle it. And I think the first thing we should do is appoint an ambassador in Delhi and then have someone senior enough in Washington who can advise your decision makers about how to go about this relationship. Okay,
almost out of time. Abhijit Iyer Mitra, quick 30-second response, please.
You know, I always love a panel where a non-native English speaker has to explain to a native English speaker what an analogy is. Look it up in the dictionary sometime. Number 2, you know, yes, China's a terrible market cheat. But he still hasn't managed to get rid of TikTok. He was authorized to, you know, sell TikTok off how long back? Do you see any motion on TikTok? When it comes to China, all his bravado just goes, it crumbles wherever. So Uncle Xi really has him by the short and curlies. I don't know exactly how, but clearly he's not willing to do anything about China. Lastly, you know, there is a very important point that the American gentleman made. There was a need to get rid of corruption. That whole, you know, finance industry, ruining industry, manufacturing, things like that is a very real thing. The system was extremely corrupt. It was working at cross purposes. And initially we thought Trump would do a lot. You know, here I was practically the, you know, the Indian spokesperson of MAGA, if you want to call it that in that sense. But it's dashed, because the problem here is his finance secretary, Scott Bessent, is George Soros' man who was part and parcel of that entire financial system that ended up in the British economy in 1999 and things like that. Remember that.
All right.
So you don't get the thief to run the
well, that's some point to ponder as far as the White House and Washington, D.C. is certainly concerned. But Brian McDonald, very quickly, the big question that is on very, very people's minds is what really will Putin do next? Because a lot could be riding for a lot of countries depending on what President Putin does next and whether this war will end soon enough or not.
Can I just first say that whatever about Donald Trump, I think he should win the Nobel Peace Prize for bringing India and China together, because this is amazing. I mean, it's astounding to me, given the history between India and China. I mean, it's a love fest. But about your question regarding Vladimir Putin, look, I mean, there's a kind of media blackout on both sides here. As the American gentlemen in the panel know, there's speculation in various American newspapers. There's speculation even in Russian media. Nobody knows what's really going on. Trump and Putin appear to have some arrangement made. It appears they have put that arrangement to the European side and to Vladimir Zelensky, and I think we're just waiting to see what happens. So I can't answer with any authority on that, but I can answer with authority on saying that I'm very happy to see you guys all getting along now.
All right. Thank you so much. On that note, Brian McDonald, Victor Gao, Pratik Chowgule, Matt Kling, Dr. Dave Brat, Abhijit Iyer Mitra, Lieutenant Raj Shukla, Ambassador Yash Sinha. Thank you so much for joining us on this edition of the National Debate.